Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the International Digital Inclusion Week panel discussion. My name is Brad Howarth. I'll be your facilitator for today's discussion. Thank you all for joining me. Let me first start by acknowledging that many of us meet on traditional lands. I myself today find myself on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Victoria, Australia. Let me just start by paying my respect to the elders past and present of the Kulin Nation and to elders past and present of all First Nations people around the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to, as I said, the inaugural International Digital Inclusion Week panel discussion. My name is Brad Howarth. I work as a journalist and facilitator here in Australia. I've had a deep and passionate connection to the topic of digital inclusion for a number of years now, so it's a great pleasure to be here, to be able to take you through this panel discussion. So let me start by giving you a little bit of background on why this event is taking place. And firstly, by giving thanks to the two people that came together to make this possible. Firstly, Angela Siefer, the Executive Director for the National Digital Inclusion Alliance of the USA, and John Hugan, the Facilitator for the Australian Digital Alliance. So thank you both for coming together and suggesting that this is an event that was worth holding and putting so much time and effort into making it possible. What is this all about? This is a catalyst for building international cooperation in digital inclusion around the world. And to do that, we've been able to gather together panelists, not just from the US and Australia, but from Europe and the United Kingdom. And thank you to the help that we've received from the EU-based All Digital and Good Things Foundation in the UK. Thank you to all of our panelists in advance for juggling time zones. So whether you might be in the morning, the evening, or the very early morning for one of you, thank you all for organising yourselves to be participating today. And of course, to all of you around the world who are tuning in. There are various other activities that are taking place as a result of this cooperation and collaboration. There will also be a joint presentation in the UK around international cooperation for digital inclusion. And of course, this is all part of the inaugural International Digital Inclusion Week, which is happening obviously as we speak. It is altogether a tremendous international opportunity for cooperation to tackle what is a global challenge and a challenge which is felt at a very personal level for those people who are directly impacted by the topic of digital inclusion. Now, what is it we mean when we talk about digital inclusion? Well, for today, we'll use a definition to say that it is the active work to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to thrive online, based around the premise that people should have every opportunity to enjoy the benefits of a digital world amidst the reality that we know that some people are missing out. And the reasons, of course, for the missing out can be many. In Australia, we particularly have issues with regard to availability. Then, of course, there are also issues of cost. There are issues of having the skill sets to be able to participate effectively online. And then, of course, there are others who find themselves excluded for reasons of ability, language, or other differences. For many people, it may be a combination of these factors, which are meaning that they cannot live a fully digitally included life. And certainly what we are looking to do today then is to explore potential remedies and solutions that may help to improve that situation. We do need to recognise that the topic of digital inclusion is one that is much bigger than just wires and wavelengths. There are very human and economic components to solve to this particular problem. We also know that it is a problem which in many societies is not particularly well perceived. And something I've come to realise that as our society becomes more digital, those people who are not digitally included are effectively silenced out of the conversation, to the point where in a digital world, those who are not digitally included very much do live by the ethos of being out of sight and out of mind. Today, and the initiatives that many of you have been involved in, both up until now and beyond now, I hope will be doing a lot of good work to reverse that scenario. So with all of that, let's get into the panel discussion. Now, the goal is to explore the similarities and differences in the challenges and solutions in digital inclusion. And to do that, as I mentioned, we have people from 4 places around the world. We're hoping that being able to share insights from different geographies may lead to the surfacing of solutions which we may not have considered in our own location. So we're hoping that people will be able to be forthcoming with ideas and solutions that those of us listening from other parts of the world will be able to take and apply. Now, that doesn't just mean our panelists. We have chat functionality enabled. So I'll be encouraging everyone who's listening and viewing to be putting their questions forward. Shauna Edson from Salt Lake City Public Library will be gathering those questions up. Oh, not quite there yet, Shauna. Kate, sorry, go back, yep. And she is our online moderator and will be gathering those questions up. So about 2/3 of the way through today, I'll be calling on Shauna to be able to bring forward the questions that have been coming in from out in the field. So please do not be shy. Undoubtedly, you've all joined because you have a burning and passionate desire to see these problems improved and remediated. So I'd certainly encourage you to be asking the panellists their thoughts on how that might be achieved. Now, for anyone that is planning on engaging further from today via social media, be it Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or whatever your particular social media tool of choice is, we would only ask that you use the hashtags today to help that conversation progress. The hashtags that we are using are #DigitalInclusion, and specifically for this particular event, #IDIW2018. So what I'm going to do now is just very briefly mention who our panellists are, and then in a moment I'll get them to tell you a little bit more about themselves. But if we can bring up the slide with our panellists, please. We have from the UK, Nicola Dean, Community Program Manager in the Starting Point Community Learning Partnership in Stockport in the UK. We have Munirih Jester, Digital Inclusion Program Manager from the San Antonio Housing Authority in the USA. Achilles Kameas, Associate Professor of Pervasive Computing Systems at the Hellenic Open University in Greece. And we will be joined, I'm not sure that she is online yet, from Australia, from the Digital Literacy Project Lead at the University of Queensland Library, Kathleen Smeaton. So I think Kathleen will be joining us shortly. Then just in terms of the people who've helped put this together for you today, on the team slide, you'll see that there is a picture there coming up in a moment of myself. We also have Shauna Edson, who will engage with the online contribution that's coming in from all of you who are listening in and moderate questions to feed those through to myself a little bit later today. And we also have Kate Davis, who is doing a brilliant job of keeping all of the technical aspects under control and doing any troubleshooting that we might need. But she's done such a great job, I'm sure there will be no trouble forthcoming. All right, so what I would like to do then is dive into the questions, but in order to do that, we need to tell you a little bit more about who will be answering them. So what I'd like to do firstly is just welcome Nicola Dean in. Nicola, if you can tell us a little bit about your role as Community Program Manager at the Starting Point Community Learning Partnership and what your organisation is all about. So let me hand over to you now, please.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I have two roles. I am co-founder and now program manager for Starting Point, which is a training provider based just outside Manchester in the north of England. Interestingly, you said Europe and the UK. I'd like to still think we're part of Europe. So I also am on the board, so a trustee of Good Things Foundation in the UK. Starting Point was set up 10 years ago to tackle digital isolation, primarily within Greater Manchester in the north of the UK. But what we realised quite quickly is it was way beyond a digital issue. So I now regard us as a social and digital inclusion organisation.
Thank you. Munirih Jester, if you could tell us a little bit about your role, please, in the Digital Inclusion Program Manager at the San Antonio Housing Authority.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Munirih Jester, and I am the Connect Home Coordinator. So Connect Home here at the San Antonio Housing Authority is part of a national program launched in 2015 by the Federal Department of Housing Urban Development. And so I joined the Housing Authority 2 years ago and helping push the Connect Home program forward. And as a Connect Home, we work to provide computer literacy to our public housing residents, and as well as digital literacy skills training and broadband connectivity. So I've been lucky to be introduced to digital inclusion through the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas here, Jordana Barton. So she was doing a study on the Texas and Mexico border and really found out this issue of the digital divide here on our border. So I've been lucky enough to work in digital inclusion for 4 years now. So I'm really happy to be here.
Great. Achilles Kameas, if you can tell us a little bit about your role then as Associate Professor of Pervasive Computing Systems at the Hellenic Open University in Greece, please.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me in this very interesting panel. I am an associate professor of pervasive computing systems, and this is at the core of computer science, let's say. So as a professor at the university, we support our students in acquiring digital knowledge and skills about computer science, but this is not our only role. We are an open university, so we offer different educational services, formal and non-formal education services to our students, and we implement many projects, EU-funded projects that relate to the development of digital skills. At the same time, I am the vice chair of the board of the All Digital European Network, and this is a network of VET providers, vocational education and training providers who are all focused on improving the digital skills of people in their respective countries. We're a network of about 60 members from more than 20 European countries, so we have a rather big impact in Europe regarding the development of digital skills.
Great, thank you for that. Can I confirm Kathleen? Hi, good, thank you for joining us. So our fourth panelist has just jumped online, so I'd like to welcome her now. She's the Digital Literacy Project Lead at the University of Queensland Library, Australia. Kathleen, if you would mind just jumping on and telling us a little bit about yourself and the role that you play.
Yes, so hi, I'm Kathleen Smeaton. I work at the University of Queensland, which is one of the biggest universities in Australia. And I'm a librarian and also a researcher, and the project that I'm leading at the moment is a project around improving the digital literacy skills of our students, because we know that as they go out into the workforce, there's going to be a real need for people to be able to operate in a digital environment throughout their careers. So we're at the moment creating a lot of resources and doing a lot of work to try and improve the digital literacy of our students.
Brilliant. All right, well, let's leap into it then with the first question. And to everyone who's listening in, please do start fielding or putting your questions forward through the chat window so that we can include those in the discussion a little bit later on. But firstly, Nicola, I might start with you and then work through the rest of the panelists with this one. But very, very broadly, what do you see as the barriers to an individual's full participation in the digital world as being today?
I think there's obviously issues around infrastructure and accessibility and affordability of kit, but for us, our main focus is on skills and also importantly, confidence and motivation. The people we support haven't always benefited from formal education in the past, and with a reluctance of change, and also a concern about learning new skills. I think one of the biggest barriers we face, or the ones that are hardest to overcome, is the psychological barrier of actually fully understanding why people need to be online, benefiting from everything that the rest of us do, but also that confidence piece of actually believing that they have the ability to learn the skills that they require.
Right. Munirih, what would you add to that? Kate, we've lost Munirih there.
Can you hear me?
We've got you now.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Sorry. So yeah, I would agree that we have the issues of, having the tools and the technology and access. And there is the psychological barrier of understanding that this can empower them and support them and their goals, right? Why, helping somebody understand why using technology can really help you take your skills and your lifelong goals of, going to college or opening a business further. So I think it's really, the barriers are technical infrastructure, but also like human and psychological.
Great. Munirih, what would your perspective be? What do you see as being the primary barriers that prevent people from engaging online?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we've got you. Achilles, can we bring you up, please?
Yes, of course. According to me, access to the digital world and its services should be a commodity, like access to water or electricity. Starting from this point, for me, lack of digital competencies, some barriers are, for example, lack of digital competencies and ways to develop them, integrate them into everyday and professional practice, and also certify digital competencies. This is something we found it's really important here in Europe. As some of the previous panelists already mentioned, there is a lack of understanding of the capacity and the properties of digital technologies, and this might lead to fear of how this technology can affect our lives, for example, our privacy. Then another issue is that digital technology changes very fast, so digital competencies must be maintained and upgraded constantly, and that needs an investment of time and other resources. And even if we do this, even if people do this, there is always the fear of the barrier of lack of infrastructure, for example, in public spaces and organizations, or lack of digital services and procedures that are supported by technology, for example, e-government, or no easy way to access digital technology or to understand digital services. And last but not least, the lack of inclusive policies put in place by those who design and implement these policies, either at regional or at national or at international level.
Great, thank you. Now, Kathleen, there's been 3 great answers already, so I'm hoping you've got something left that you can add in there. Any further perspectives to add with regard to the barriers that are preventing people from being fully digitally included?
Yeah, I think that obviously I'd echo what everybody's saying about, I think we've moved away from the binary digital divide where it was the haves and haves not, that actually, I've got access to technology, I don't have access to technology. I think there still is some of that. But speaking as someone who comes from the country with the slowest internet in the world, it's also about the type of technology that you have access to. And I think when we talk about inclusion in the digital world, I actually think there are different types of inclusion. So you might be, fully included socially, or you can get your social support through social media or whatever it might be, but you might not be economically included in the digital world. So you might still have to go down to a bank to do your banking because you don't understand how to do that, or go down to get your government benefits or whatever it might be, or interact with the government in the government offices. So I think when we talk about digital inclusion, there's so many different aspects to it. Or you might be, as I said, you could be socially included and economically not included, or you might be economically included. But if you're alone by yourself and you might be elderly without any relatives around you, but you can't have any social inclusion, then that might be just as big as a deficit. So I think it's quite nuanced, the different ways you can be digitally included.
Great. Kathleen, I might stay with you and then go back through the panel in reverse order this time. Tell us a little bit about what your organisation does then to address those barriers.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously as a university, our main role is education. But one of the things that we've quickly realised is that education now means being able to learn in a digital environment, and then when you finish learning, you're going to have to work in a digital environment. And that means being able to be fully digitally included across a range of areas. So I would say, economically, socially, politically, all those types of things, the digital economy. So you can operate in the digital economy. So what we're trying to do is develop these capabilities in students in a variety of ways, through a lot of online training and through trying to get them familiar with the technologies. I also don't think that it's always a socioeconomic barrier. So I think sometimes we can talk about, low socioeconomic people from low socioeconomic backgrounds might struggle to be digitally included. And I absolutely do think that that is part of it. But we also have students that might be coming from relatively, a higher socioeconomic background. But if they have no familiarity with the technology, then they can still struggle. So we're trying to see what we're developing as something that cuts across for all of our students. And we're developing a lot of online resources around digital inclusion and digital literacy, everything from how to use social media properly to digital citizenship, how to be a good digital citizen, to being aware of scams and, finding good information online and fighting fake news and all those types of things. So that's what we're doing at the moment.
Brilliant. Achilles, I'll get you now to talk a little bit about the work that you do now. There's a couple of organisations you're speaking on behalf of here, but tell us about what it is that you're doing then to address some of the barriers that you raised a moment ago.
Yes, sure. As a university, we offer formal and informal training programs to people of all ages. As I said, again, we are an open university, so we are not restricted by any age. Our students are from, let's say, 25 up to 65 and even more. But in addition to that, being a member of the All Digital Network, we in All Digital we implement a set of activities that would help lift these barriers. For example, we are training our members in developing their capacity to offer trainings on digital skills themselves. We produce policy papers and we organize events for the European Commission officials and for officials at national and regional levels. We have supported the establishment of the National Digital Skills and Job Coalitions. There is one of them in every European country, and they are all collaborating at the European level. And we also provide support for the establishment of digital skills frameworks like the DIGICOM framework or the ECF framework. The latter one has already become a standard. We implement European projects that promote the acquisition or the certification of digital skills, and one of these projects is called DCDS, and I'd like to talk about it when we are going to talk about good practices later on. So more or less, this is what we do as a network, but because we are a network, most of our activities are also implemented by our members. For example, there is this, every year we organize the Digital Skills Week, that is a 1 week where digital events or digital skills related events take place all over Europe by our members, and this is a high visibility event. Every year millions of people are trained or participate in events organized in the European countries.
Right, thank you. Munirih, if you could tell us a little bit about what your organisation does to help tear down those barriers to inclusion.
Oh, I have to say, I feel very lucky that, the San Antonio Housing Authority is constantly trying to innovate and really try to bridge the digital divide to our public housing residents. So, I was sharing that we have different strategies for providing. For example, we work on providing broadband access, right? So we have an amazing IT department that works on, we have buildings and people who live in our communities and expanding the Wi-Fi wide enough that they can access. So broadband access is something that we do as part of our program, as well as providing digital skills training to our residents to help them in their goals on workforce development and education, overall quality of life, and as well, and then providing them with their computer devices. So we really try to be comprehensive in essentially providing the 3 basic layers of digital inclusion, as well as working with the outside partners and communities and connecting them to other resources. So I would say that we, as an organization, we have our own program, and we tackle the 3 areas of digital inclusion pretty heavily, and coming up with different strategies. For example, the Mozilla Foundation put out a challenge to connect the unconnected. It was a national challenge, and we are the only housing authority part of that. And our IT department created this Solo Mesh network. There was this essentially Wi-Fi powered equipment powered by solar poles, by solar panels, so we can expand it to our neighborhoods and our communities. So we won 3rd place. That just went out, $100,000 to help us do that. And then we have different strategies for acquiring computers and refurbishing them and giving to our residents that complete 14 hours, 16 hours of computer literacy training. So I'm always a little concerned to talk about like what we do, because we have so many different areas that we're trying to tackle. But I would just end this question saying that I feel like we have this internal process and figure out how we can be effective and comprehensive on our service, but also have the intention of bringing digital inclusion to be an issue that the whole community cares about. And it was not just SAHA and the San Antonio Housing Authority Connect Home program doing the work, but also engaging other communities throughout the city and really throughout the country to say, hey, you know, what do you do, and how, let's work together and see how digital inclusion plays a role in education and plays a role in economic development, it plays a role in workforce development. So we have this other session of within the organization that's constantly trying to engage the wider community and engage the leaders in the city to really raise the issue and help us provide digital inclusion programs to our residents.
Great. Nicola, if you could tell us a little bit about the work that your organisations do then to tear down these barriers, both with Starting Point and with the Good Things Foundation.
Yeah, as far as Starting Point's concerned, the thing that drives us the most is our business model, that we're a social enterprise. And what that allows us to do is we are working with people who digital literacy is only one of the factors that actually maths and English is the first thing that we need to work on, that we have a number of learners that can't read. So to expect for them to be able to be online is a challenge in itself. Because through social enterprise then we have various financial streams, which means that we can work with people, or we have the luxury to work with people that goes beyond restrictions of everyday funding. So for example, we have a learner who we've worked with for 5 years. It's taken 5 years to get her to be able to send an email and apply for a job online, primarily because maths and English to start with. She had issues of hoarding. There was so much going on in her life before she was so far away from the job market. In order to be able to apply for jobs online, it's a 5-year process. So no funder in their right mind is going to support somebody for 5 years, although the benefits are just phenomenal. So we do have a great luxury in the fact that we are a social enterprise business model, which allows us to be able to spend time and invest resources in the people that need it the most.
Great, thank you. Did you want to say anything on behalf of Good Things Foundation?
Oh, I can do. They'll go mad that I didn't do. So I think, to be quite honest, very similar to what I was saying, there's a real acknowledgement that digital inclusion doesn't stop and end with digital, and that actually a vast number of social issues can be tackled through digital solutions, but it's acknowledging those social issues and also being really quite creative and innovative on how we fund that, and encouraging organisations that are part of the Good Things Network to think in that creative manner as well, and not to always necessarily be reliant on funding, and because not only does it benefit each individual organisation to think wider, but also it allows people to provide a better service for their customers.
All right, so I'm going to dive into, I guess, some of the practical side of this now. So I'm going to direct my first question here to Kathleen, and I'll just say to my other panellists, if you want to jump in on this question, please sort of wave it at Kate so that she knows to bring you into the conversation once Kathleen's given her answer. But the question I wanted to put to you, Kathleen, is what is the most powerful thing that you've learned that influences how you work in a practical way?
Sorry. I guess the most powerful thing that I've learned is that digital inclusion affects everybody really differently. So it's just, as I was saying before, it's so complex, and there's so many different ways to be digitally included or not digitally included, or be included in some aspects and not. So, and not in others. So I guess the thing that I've learned is to look beyond what you think how you think somebody might behave in the digital world, or to take away those assumptions that you think they might be included in some aspects or not in others. And I think this came when I did quite a bit of research into this, into how some women from low socioeconomic backgrounds were interacting with the online world, and if they were digitally included. So I spoke to one lady who was a single mother, and she had 2 children that had really severe health problems. And so she was really digitally included in the term that she had found a support group online for other mothers that were going through these things. She felt very included in that aspect, and was really using the online world to get a lot of support and get a lot of information about her children's healthcare. But in terms of being economically included, she, as Nicola was saying before, I think sometimes it's a reading and writing issue. While she could interact in those sort of spaces, because she didn't have the necessary skills to perhaps interact in other spaces, she was unable to interact with any government services online, or if she did, it would take a tremendous amount of time, or she'd end up having to go into a government office, and there's not many left in Australia because everyone's being pushed online, and spend 4 hours in there trying to interact. And so it was about thinking, okay, well, people are included in different ways. And I spoke to another lady who was in the same research, and she was also from a low socioeconomic background, and she was all over being economically included. She knew how to get the best deals, the best bargains. She did everything online shopping before she went to the shop. She knew where to get the best deal, knew where to get everything. But in terms of being, I would say, politically included, or having an understanding of the news or anything like that, she was getting all her news through her social media channels, which is not always bad, but it can be problematic if you are unable to tell the difference between what might be a fake news story and what might not be. So I think it just taught me the most powerful thing I've learned is when you look at somebody, you have to not make any assumptions and understand that they may be bringing different things to the table than what you expect. And at work, in my job currently at the University of Queensland, we deal with students who have very often come from private schools, so might come from fairly affluent backgrounds, but that doesn't mean that they are digitally included. They might be in some aspects, but in a lot of others, they really don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what they don't know. And so there's a lot of areas where we need to bring those skills up to a level where they are able to actually learn and then work in the digital environment. So yeah, I guess that's what I've learned is don't judge a book by its cover.
Great. Would anyone else from our panellists then like to share something powerful that they've learned that's influencing the way that they work? If you could wave at the screen, and then Kate can know to bring you up. Munirih, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, so I think the most powerful thing I've been learning, and still in the process, is really the power of coalitions, and really finding, creating alliances, and know. I know digital inclusion, it's such a huge issue, right? Digital divide is such a huge issue, and it's not just one organization and one program that's gonna really have the impact that you look for in your community. So I think we, in a practical way, we have been lucky enough to really have the San Antonio community come in and step up and really going out and say, hey, you do workforce development, for example, and let's work together. How can we link, digital skills training and access to broadband and a computer? How can we help somebody once they go to their training continue on their efforts to find a job or to get a certification? So, so by reaching out throughout the community, it really, it's a powerful thing that really helps your organization, your program, really tackle digital inclusion as a whole, and not just be I'm only gonna provide I'm always so focused on this little portion of refurbished computers, and I'm helping to bridge the digital divide by providing devices. But there's a broader and larger conversation to be had in the wider community. So I guess asking for an example in a practical way. So we have been lucky enough to create to bring the San Antonio Digital Inclusion Alliance to life, and it's only a year old. But just in this last year, it's amazing to see how much the community grew, how much the conversation around digital inclusion grew in our city. As part of just coming together once a month and talk about the issue, we were able to create partnerships that really help in my program, we partnered with Goodwill Industries in San Antonio to be our refurbisher, but as well to provide workforce development training to our residents once they complete Connect Home, once they complete the training. So I think, realizing that there's different tracks in different areas and connecting the dots between the organizations has been really powerful and really allowed us to think, okay, we don't have to provide everything, right? I don't need to be teaching everybody how to get our certification and doing online training, because there is already an organization that can do that. So I would say, the power of partnerships, it's really an important aspect in digital inclusion.
Great. Achilles, I saw you raise your hand there. So I'll put that question to you then. What's the most powerful thing that you've learned that influences the way you work in a practical way?
Well, I've learned a couple of powerful things. First of all, I'd like to second the opinion we just heard. We also believe that collaborative efforts can have a far bigger impact and much better results than solitary efforts. And that's why we prefer to engage in collaborative projects, either with local communities or with international partners. But then we also believe that we've also learned that at some point top-down systematic approaches should be put in place to increase the impact and of all these efforts. So although initiatives start usually at a small at a narrow local level or regional level, at some point we need to put in place top-down policies and in order to broaden the impact of and the audience of our services. And to ensure sustainability, we've learned that we must invest in teachers and trainers because they are probably the most stable population of this community that is involved in the development of digital skills and competencies. So I think we need more teacher training, professional development programs to be put in place for continuous professional development of teachers.
Thank you. Nicola, so if you've got any examples you'd like to bring forward, I'd ask you to do so now, but to also move that conversation along, very keen to find out how you involve community members in creating programs. Nicola? Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I need skills on how to use my trackpad. So we're community organisers at heart, so I think that probably internationally there may be different definitions, but for me the iron rule is that you don't do for people what they can do for themselves. And as far as digital inclusion is concerned and what that looks like for us is twofold really. I've always struggled with that concept of an IT trainer, and I possibly was one at one time, of going into a setting with possibly 10 laptops for a couple of hours and teaching people how to get online, and then packing those laptops away and driving away and say, see you this time next week. Because I don't know if we're getting people online by doing that. We're showing them for a couple of hours, but they're definitely not building the skills and the resilience to stay online. So for me, it's really about working with existing community groups because they know where people are and they can get to the people that we can't, and working out what it is that's stopping them from actually being able to deliver some of this work. So is that investment in simply room rent in a community centre, or is it upskilling local people who are relatively confident perhaps in communication skills and supporting people, but feel that their digital knowledge isn't up to scratch, but actually a lot of the time they possibly only need to be 1 or 2 pages ahead of everybody else. So for me, it's really about investing in communities to do this themselves, but also investing in individuals, because I think that we've never been in a position where somebody hasn't come to us that doesn't have some element of knowledge of something, because the digital world is so vast, and I think there's a real positive of encouraging people to share the skills that they have. So in reality, what that would look like is possibly somebody talking about recipes online, and acknowledging that the person that they're working with is a better cook than them, and getting all that anecdotal information and conversations and really building trust. It seems so far removed from us teaching people safety and how to search confidently and how to transact online, but actually these are the real building blocks in what we're trying to do. So yeah, for me, it is very much about working with the assets that are already in our community and strengthening them.
Great. Kathleen, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to share then on how you involve community members in creating programs?
Yeah, so with all the resources that we're creating, obviously our community is our students, so we work in student-staff partnerships. So we actually have students that just come and work as part of our team. It's a program that the University of Queensland runs. It's fairly new, and so the students are not. The whole idea is, as the name suggests, they're our partners rather than our employees. So they have an equal voice and an equal say in everything that we do, and they are equally part of the decision making, and their views are equally valid. And it's really, it's great. And I think a lot of the time we sort of can speak about, I'm going to have user experience design or user-centered design or whatever the words are that we use. But sometimes when your users tell you what you don't want them to tell you, it can be quite easy to go, well, I was doing user-centered design, but in this case, I know better than the users. And I think that's a trap that, you can fall into. So having students as partners with us and really putting that partnership at the front and center has made us really question some of the decisions we were making, because we have to put users at the heart of what we're doing. Otherwise, we're just creating things that we want that may not be fit for purpose when they actually get out there.
Okay, so I'll move on in a second, but before I do, Achilles or Munirih, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
The way we involve community members is when we design a program at the first stage, at an initial stage, we ask them to participate in the piloting of this program. So they have the benefit of receiving the program, let's say, for free, and then we co-design with them the final version of the program in a way. So when the program is made available later on, it will have taken into account the comments and the needs of the community, of the specific community targets.
Right. All right, so Munirih, unless you have something to add on to that, I'll move on to the next question.
I just have
please.
a little
Go ahead.
For us, involving the community, it's critical. So we actually are expanding a program that we call Digital Ambassadors. So we actually look in our community and recruit some members of our community to serve as digital ambassadors to be part of the program. And I've been spending almost 5 months with them and training them and getting them to understand the whole, give their input and their experience with the digital divide, and also providing them a way to be part of the solution. So, so right now I have 6 of our residents, they are actively engaged in their community, and they are actually providing some of the computer classes in our community centers that we have throughout the city. So it's really amazing to see, empowering people to be actively engaged and be part of the solution, and coming from this, like, hey, I don't have internet, I don't know how to do this, to seeing them coming in the beginning, and now seeing somebody just providing a training for a group of 7 people and just do amazingly, job. So it's really important to find those people in the community that's really willing to be part of the solution. I think it will be my key takeaway.
Great. So I'll put a question back to the whole panel here. And whoever wants to go first, please just raise your hand so that we can highlight you on the video line. How do we actually know that problems are having the desired impact? We often hear a lot of anecdotal stories about people whose lives have been improved, but are we winning the battle overall? And what should we actually be looking for? What should we be measuring to know that we are having a positive impact? Anyone want to have a crack at that one? I see a lot of people smiling, but no one's waving at me at the moment to tell me that. Kathleen, I'm going to pick on you for a second. Oh, no, Munirih, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's the $1 million question, right? It's hard to see that one trainee or one computer or connectivity is equal this person going to college or getting a job. It's not such a clear-cut analysis you can do. It takes time. And I would argue that it's not just computer literacy and technology access that's going to have the desired impact. So within the housing authorities, we have a lot of programs. So we have a lot of self-sufficiency programs that we are working with. And, people say, the coordinators of the other program tell me, like, Muni, this person, she went to Connect Home, she got the computers, and now she got a job and she's working, and this is great. And I also feel like it's also not fair for me to say, great, she went to the program, she got the skills and the devices, and that's why she got a job, right? And because I know this other program has been working, day in and day out with her and providing her with a lot of resource and support to get her there. So I think it's hard to measure the impact because it's not one computer is equal a job. It's the whole ecosystem and the whole ecosystem working together and helping the person to leverage technology to help in their goals. But it's a hard one to talk about impact. Outcomes, we can say we connected 800 people, we have given 700 computers away, we trained 13,000 of our residents. But the impact of that is something that we're still trying to figure out, okay, how are we gonna measure this in the long run? So let me know whenever you guys figure out what's the best way to measure the impact too. So,
anyone got any thoughts then as to how we might do that?
I think it would be. I think I just completely echo what Munirih was just saying. It's so hard to measure whether somebody's digitally included or whether we've had this impact, because what are you measuring? And I think because, as I think a couple of people have said before, which I agree with, everything changes all the time. So I think a lot of what digital inclusion is about, if you sort of boil it down to its essence, is being willing to continually learn, because everything's always changing. So what digital inclusion looks like today might be different to what digital inclusion looks like in a year or even 6 months. And so I don't know if there's a way to measure whether people have become willing lifelong learners in the digital space. I'm not sure how we would do that. I think it's difficult enough for teachers to give someone an A or a B on an English test, let alone for us to say, have you developed the skills to be a lifelong learner, which will enable you to be digitally included for the rest of your life? But I'd like a magic answer to that one as well, if anyone's got one.
Does anyone have that magic answer? No one's volunteering. Okay. Achilles, I might actually go to you then, because you do work in that pan-European network. Have there been things that have been learned in one area in Europe that have been applied elsewhere? And And similarly to the question before then, have there been things that you've learned that don't work, that that members have stopped doing because you've found over time they weren't effective?
Well, I cannot think of any specific example to give you, but in general, I can say, yes, we are working a lot on this transferability, let's say, of good practices and results from one member to the other member. We have annual events where all members come together and they present their practices. We also have awards that are given to members who excel in developing good content or implementing nice projects for digital inclusion. We have events that take place all over Europe simultaneously. Yes, we work a lot on this issue of transferring and adapting the results one has achieved to another country. You know, Europe is, united Europe is not united so much. So different cultures, different legislations, different approaches, lots of differences. We try to build on these differences. That's why with every good policy or with every good practice come also a guide of how to adapt this policy and practice to every other state. Now, going back to the previous question though, and being a university teacher, well, in the university, we have some ways to measure impact, especially short-term impact for our students and our lifelong learners. And another thing that we do is that we somehow form communities of these students, our graduates from formal or non-formal educational courses that we offer. And we monitor how they fare in their jobs and how many of them come back to us for an upgrade of their knowledge and skills, or getting a new course on some different domain or topic.
Right. Okay, Nicola, I might go to you now. On this topic of cooperation then, how have you cooperated or collaborated to improve inclusion, and what makes that collaboration worthwhile?
Yeah, I think probably some of my answer goes to answer the previous question as well, actually. That for me, I think we've all sat in those partnership meetings where you wonder why you're there and if it's going anywhere, but actually building up a really strong network of people that you trust and respect to be able to share times where things aren't working, I think has been extremely valuable. But also we appreciate that as an organisation the size of ours, which is relatively small, I would say, to support around about 1,000 people a year with digital skills. We can't do that on our own. Simply having the access to those people, we can't do that on our own. So one of our strongest partnerships is with the housing associations, because we find that the people who are most likely to be offline are people who are living in social housing. So to be able to get the support of housing associations, just to be able to actually have access to people, to encourage them to get involved in what we do, is really, really important, and something we couldn't do if we didn't collaborate. I also think, just on that, there has been a real shift recently of, especially with larger organisations, statutory organisations, housing associations, of the digital inclusion piece should never have been lumped alongside all those nice skills for life things like horticulture and making hanging baskets and all those sorts of things. And now it's really seen not only as a necessity for residents, but also an acknowledgement that this could potentially be a cost saver for these organisations as well as their residents move online. In England and Wales at the moment, we're getting a new system for benefits. So it's very much more stick than a carrot for people, that they have to be online now. And I think that actually the collaboration piece is a lot easier now, because a lot of the statutory organisations, job centres, housing providers, councils understand this and see it almost as a point of panic, really, as to how on earth are we going to support all our residents. So collaboration initially was quite difficult, but we always saw it as vital. But I think as times are changing, it's coming easier, but still equally as vital for what we do.
Right, so Shauna, in a moment I'm going to ask you to suggest any questions that might have come in from our viewers out on the internet. Before we do that, did anyone else have a thought around cooperation and collaboration to improve inclusion?
Yeah, I'd like to contribute something to this topic. I think collaboration should take place across the entire spectrum, let's say, from those high up in the hierarchy, in the political things or in the state things, to those down closer to the local communities. We have found out that all of these sides have things to contribute into implementing effective digital inclusion activities. That's why I also said before in my previous intervention that we should also implement top-down plans and policies, and not only bottom-up activities at a local level. And also collaboration across countries, at least in the European reality, is really important, because out of these differences in the culture, we may get something that is valuable for the entire for the entire union, for the entire continent. I would like to bring it to your attention one project we are implementing at the moment, and I would like to share with you in the chat the website of this project. It's this one. It's called the DCDS, and DCDS is about to develop a digital competencies development system, which is completely aligned with the European framework for digital competencies called DIGCOM version 2.1. I don't know if you ever heard about it. And this, I'm saying this because I saw a question in the chat about how we could certify digital competencies. This is one direction Europe is moving towards. There is this framework called DIGCOM, and now there are efforts across the continent to create some sort of training paths and certifications associated with these training paths, and all of this have to do with digital skills. Here are some of the objectives of the project, and this will have a big impact if successful. Will have a big impact in Europe because it will be the first attempt to create a homogeneous training system based on learning outcomes and certification system based on learning outcomes that can be applied by training providers all over Europe.
Great. All right, Shauna, what I might do now, unless anyone else wanted to offer in there, Shauna, do you want to start with a couple of questions that have been coming in from online?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. We have a question from Laura. She asked, does your government have a policy regarding digital inclusion, digital literacy? Has it acknowledged the challenge of expecting citizens to use online tools to access government services?
Anyone want to have a go at that? Firstly, just wave your hand and we'll get Kate to highlight you. Yeah, Kathleen, let's go with you on that one.
I don't think that the Australian government is really acknowledging that there's a problem with people not being able to access digital services. All government offices now are online. People are just directed online. It doesn't matter. You know, if they've got an issue, go online, use the app, do this, do that. How they might do those things, I don't think is really considered. I've spoken to people when I've been doing research who are unable to read or write, and they're being directed to online services, which is just crazy. So I think it's obviously a big problem. We know it's there, that the digital digital world doesn't work for everybody, but I certainly don't think that governments are, well, certainly in Australia, I don't think the government's paying any attention, because it's a big cost-saving measure to get everything online, I think is the way that they're looking at it. It's cheaper to have people use an app or go online on the internet than to rent premises, employ staff, and do things that way. So I don't think that they're really looking at it. And I think that there's a real need for those face-to-face services. I don't think that you can replace them all with the digital world. And I think that that's not just with the government, but as a university, when we have first-year students coming to us, or second-year students who are, young, they've grown up in the digital world, they still want face-to-face services. They don't want to do everything online, because sometimes it's difficult and sometimes they just want to do it face-to-face. So I think a lot of the time people just think, a digital solution will be great, it'll fix all our problems, it'll save us money, but we're not actually acknowledging that, well, maybe that there's no one size fits all that will work.
Yeah, I would just, I agree, Kathleen, and it's just, the sense is that there is no care, or there's no thinking about the people that is not going to be able to access that service online, right? That is just, it's going to be cost saving, it's going to be great, we don't have to worry about this paperwork and all the stuff. But I think, that raises the issue about the phone, right? They use all the phone and the computer. People think, everybody now has a phone, so we can just create a cool app and that's going to solve our problem. And then we raise, for us, like, you raise two issues that say, like, first they have a phone, they have a smartphone even, or not, but they have a phone, and I mean, they're digitally included, they're connected, and they can sign up for services. So that doesn't take in consideration that, I like to say the phone allows people to be a consumer of information, but not a producer. So when we talk about digital inclusion, we're talking about allowing people to be a producer and really leverage technology for their lifelong goals. And you cannot do that with the phone. The technology is not there yet. But also that somebody with the phone can download an app and sign up for services, and that's not the reality, especially on our communities in public housing residents. The residents, sometimes they have a phone, but there's data caps, and they don't know how to download an app. They don't know how to connect to Wi-Fi and really to save the data. So there is a lot of issues that when people design solutions using technology, they're not really thinking about the implications of who they're left behind. So there is no policy or taking care of that right now.
Good. Anyone else got any thoughts on the government role? Nicola?
Yeah, I mean, I've just posted the UK government framework. I echo quite a bit of what people have said previously. There is financial support coming from our government, but I think a lot of the time it's an understanding. I think human nature is that we assume our experiences are the same as other people's experiences, and I have had repeated conversations with people in various levels of power as to how smart smartphones can actually be. And I think that was maybe something that's been just spoken about, that we were challenged as to, is it really necessary to invest the amount of money that we do in supporting people in skills, because you can just pick up a smartphone and use it, and it's intuitive. That's the nature of it. But I think that's coming from somebody with a privileged background and a good education, who is using a good smartphone, and actually that's not where the people that we're working with are at. And actually some of these phones, I can't use them. They're so cumbersome and old as well sometimes. So I think that piece on understanding and influence is still really vital. That's what good things do. But I think there is an acknowledgement of government as to at least what the core skills should be, and funding to support that.
Right. Shauna, do we have another question from our viewers and listeners?
Yes, this question is addressed to Kathleen from Abigail from Telstra at the Yarra Libraries meetup. With students and the prevalence of the idea of digital native, what skills do you find are lacking?
I don't believe the digital native exists, first of all. That term just makes me want to beat my head against a wall and cry, and especially it makes me want to triple cry because it's still an Australian government policy and we're still writing curriculum documents in the Australian education sector using the term digital natives, when all the empirical research that's been done shows there's no such thing as a digital native. Your level of digital ability relates to things like your socioeconomic background, your the amount of exposure you've had to different technologies, whether you've been encouraged to be a producer as well as a consumer, as Mooney touched on earlier. So I've always found it really frustrating. And the good thing now is we've been doing a lot of work this year at UQ, at the university, where there's a real perception amongst a lot of faculty here that we're teaching digital natives and they all know how to use technology. And we did quite a large survey where we asked our students, well, what digital capabilities have you come to university with? What do you know? And these 18, 19-year-olds are saying, the thing I hate the most is when I go to a lecture and everybody tells me how to lecturers just assume I know how to use this technology I've never seen before. So I think that there's this digital native, it's just a myth, and it's actually a really harmful myth because it affects the way that we're writing policy. It affects the things that we're doing and the curriculums that we're writing. And we're not giving people the education that we need because we see them using an iPad or we see them using something quickly and we think, oh, they can do it all. Well, my 7-year-old is all over the iPad. Like, he can do anything that you want, but can he actually critically engage with information? Can he actually, do all these things? No, he can't. And neither can my eldest son because he hasn't been taught that. So just because somebody can press the buttons doesn't make them actually a wise consumer or producer of any kind of information or make them digitally included. So the digital native myth is one that I just can't, it just frustrates me.
Good. All right. Thank you for that. Now, Shauna, do we have another question there ready to go?
We do. This is a question from Robert in Melbourne. He asks, given recent high-profile data breaches and the continuing battle over data between governments, criminals, and citizens, what is the basis for confidence for participation in the digital world?
All right, who wants to tackle that one? If no one volunteers, I'll pick somebody out of our panelists. So, all right, Achilles, I'm going to go with you on that one. I just don't know why, but I think it might be one you could probably have a go at.
Sorry, I was reading the chat. So can you repeat the question, please? I was reading the latest post in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Given recent high-profile data breaches and the continuing battle over data between governments, criminals, and citizens, what is the basis for confidence for participation in the digital world?
Well, it's a continuing battle, as the attendee says, and in order to win a battle, we need all our efforts to be concentrated on this. So we all have to understand that it's the incentive for participating in the digital world. We always have more to win than to lose. But well, as we are still developing this digital world, there will always be some losses along the way, and we must be prepared to deal with them. I'm pretty sure that, well, being a computer engineer, I know that any digital system has to be tested before it is foolproof, and this test at some point has to be done in real settings. So this is the risk we are all taking in order to reap the benefits of more connected, faster, and more productive and efficient world.
Just to ask a follow-on, and maybe, Nicola, I might direct this to you then. Are you finding that all of the attention being given to privacy and data breaches is actually is that creating another barrier that's scaring people away from coming online?
Yeah, that was actually what I was thinking, that our biggest issue when it comes to security and data is to actually encourage people do it in the first place. That, you know, possibly 12 months, maybe even 2 years ago now, there was an NHS security breach, and that puts us trying to encourage people to order prescriptions online back several months, when actually that affected GP practices as opposed to individuals themselves. Yeah, I think actually it's both ends of the spectrum. We work with young people who I regard as on Facebook but not online, who just don't really understand the value and the power of the information that they provide quite willingly, and then work with another spectrum of people who are just so terrified. And again, understanding and being able to understand some of the myths. Again, I mean, it was said before, getting their news from social media, which isn't necessarily always true, and breaking down all the information and actually understanding. People are reading stories and not understanding what they're reading, and that fear factor is something that we're dealing with on a daily basis. Yeah.
Got it. All right, Shauna, I'll throw back to you then. Do we have another question that's come in from the group chat?
Yes, this question is directed to Munirih. Can you talk more about how local digital inclusion alliances have developed and the tips for how they can be most effective?
Yeah, I think the beauty of digital inclusion is that, you know, it's the beauty, and I guess I don't know if it's the curse, is that it's such a new topic, if you will, in the community, that it really allows you, for anybody that does one part of digital inclusion work, to really step up and be the convener. And really, so I feel like you must, you know, digital inclusion really needs a superman or superwoman in each community that's willing to really bring people together. And, you know, sometimes it's just, you know, this one program. So we, when we launched Connect Home Lunch here in San Antonio, we created a partners conveni, and we noticed that a lot of people is like, hey, you know, I provide computer classes, I can help you program, or I can, you know, I provide technology and refurbished computers, so maybe we can talk. So all of a sudden, from this issue of digital divide and the topic digital inclusion that a lot of people not necessarily was familiar with, they started realizing that they had a piece to the puzzle. So we started to being actively going out in the community, and, you know, essentially there was like a group of 5 or 6 of us that got together and really, you know, think about digital inclusion and implications for workforce development, for literacy, for college attainment and homework divide. And we prepare a presentation and would go down to any department, any program, any organization that really wanted to hear about. So we really did a lot of work of going out and say, hey, let me tell you how economic development has a role to play, you know, plays in digital inclusion. Let's talk about how smart city can be part of digital inclusion conversation. Let's see how your program and literacy can be heightened if we use technology, introduce people to technology. So I think in the beginning it was a lot of conversation and really getting this group going, to the point that we decided to become a formal alliance. So again, we are new as Digital Inclusion Alliance goals in the US. So we put this big summit together, you know, called the Digital Inclusion Summit in San Antonio, and that gave our opportunity to, you know, the mayor to come out, city council and organizations and everybody to come together and really explore this topic. And then I think having that event in the beginning was really essential to get people excited about it. And then at the end of this event, we had like 160, 200 people come, and we invited them to be part of a coalition. So after that, you know, the tip I would say is just a constant contact, right? To keep meeting and talking about the issues and sharing best practices and resources is critical. So after that summit, we start meeting every month as a group. And we're still going, and we're now just realized that we need to formalize our structure. So we're we're finalizing our charter, and we're going to have our second Digital Inclusion Summit October 30th, actually. So to get everybody excited again and figure out what's going to be a project we can all collaborate and work on. So find your people, find your tribe that care about digital inclusion, and really start calling out people. And if you join an alliance, that'll be my main suggestion.
Great. So we've got 15 minutes left, and I think there's probably a few more questions to come in. So Shauna, back to you.
Okay, this question is from Dawn. Older people present some unique difficulties for participating in the digital revolution. For example, lack of immersion in the technology in their more receptive years. Also, memory issues for some require repeated instruction, which is frustrating for them and for their teacher. Would you describe any programs you have experienced to tackle those specific difficulties?
I can contribute something here if you want, because I just posted something in the chat. We implemented a project called Lingua Cuisine, and actually the leader was the University of Newcastle from UK. And the idea behind this project is that we teach digital skills to people through cooking. And the participants in the project were elderly people, most of them ladies, with no digital skills at all, but with very good cooking skills, of course. And we used tablets, smartphones, and so on to train them in how they could videotape a recipe, all the stages of preparing a recipe, and then uploading the recipe online together with the videos they edited. They shot the videos themselves, and then they edited the videos, and then they uploaded everything in an online platform that this project has developed. It was really real fun. Very, very nice project for us who were managing it, also for the participants, and also we had a lot of good food, as you understand, during the training sessions.
Right. Does anyone else have an answer on the question with regard to working with older citizens?
Yeah, I'll jump in there if that's okay. For us, there's a great value of not only understanding their motivations, but using tools that they're going to be using regularly. So communication always lands far better than transacting. The ability to not only be able to phone people, and family and friends either around the world or around the country, but be able to see them. It's a skill that they're probably going to use outside of a learning setting. And we think that works quite well. There are far more barriers, obviously, and I'm just going to post something. It's a couple of years old now, this report, but it's about digital and dementia. So I'll post that report as well, because that gives a lot more information about additional barriers. But we think when the majority of our learners are older, they tend to be the demographic where we work who aren't online, and yeah, it's definitely understanding their motivations, and cooking features quite heavily with us too.
Great. Shauna, do we have any further? Oh, sorry, did anyone else want to jump in there? No? Okay, Shauna, another question from the audience.
Yeah, this is a question directed at Achilles. Could you please expand on the certification of digital capability and the skills framework for digital capability?
I have posted a few things here in the chat for this. There are two frameworks that have been developed here in Europe. One is called ECF. It is the European Incompetencies Framework, and this is addressed to the ICT professionals. So there is a list of 40 competencies that the ICT professionals should have, and now this has become a standard, and it's going to be adopted by industry and so on. And then we have the other framework called DIGCOMP, the Digital Competencies Framework, and this lists 21 digital competencies for the average citizen. based on this framework, there are several training offers available in different countries by different organizations. And now we are running this project. All Digital is coordinating it, called the CDS. I've put the link online in the chat. And this project aims to produce a pan-European certification system for digital competencies based mainly on learning outcomes in the DigiComp framework.
Great, thank you. All right, Shauna, do we have another question out there?
Yes, I'm not sure if this is so much of a question as a call to action, but we'll take it as well. This is from Brendan Fitzgerald at 641 DI. He says, it's great to have this international discussion. I wondered whether out of today's discussion, we could get a shared statement of that A, articulated the problem on a global scale, and B, calls for one key action for governments to implement.
Anyone got a response to that? No one's immediately leaping forth here.
I think that's a great idea, Brendan. I think it'd be something really good to do. And just responding to another comment that's in the chat, which was a lot of government ministers and managers have poor digital skills themselves, but they don't want to admit it. For our international audience, if you ever watch George Brandis, who was the minister in charge of try to explain metadata, it is one of the most hilarious things you've ever seen. He doesn't understand what metadata is, yet he's the minister in charge of all of these things. So I think that sometimes people are lacking digital skills. So I think it would be a great idea to have a sort of a, as Brendan suggested, you know, to get a shared statement of the problem and a key action that we could put forward to government to make it easier for them. I mean, not everybody in government lacks digital skills or lacks understanding of the problem, but just like every organisation, every walk of life, there are people there who probably are lacking the skills and lacking the knowledge that could maybe benefit from some more information about it.
Cool.
Well, and sorry, I'm just going to answer a question that's in the chat right now. Sorry.
Which is,
yeah, I am. How we show that digital inclusion provides a good return on investment. So I think that there's so many great examples, and I'm actually going to, Brendan Fitzgerald, who asked the last question, he used to work for an organisation called Info Exchange. Sorry, Brendan, I'm dubbing you in here as well. And they wired a block of social housing units in inner city Melbourne and did some work around that and looked at how, and Brendan, I'm probably getting this wrong, so you may want to link to the correct article in the chat. They looked at how wiring up this block of social housing flats and teaching people about digital skills and what effect that had, you know, economically, because we want to be making money, and obviously the government's thinking about the bottom line and what does it mean for the economy, how are we making our money back. And it showed that when you did these things and when you implement these programs, it's good for the economy. So I think there's so many good examples. That's just one, but I'm sure lots of the other panelists have got examples of how this is good for the community and makes things easier for the government.
All right, so we're getting down to the last couple of minutes. So anyone got a quick follow on from that?
Yeah, I was just saying, like, you know, what's the share statement and what can we do? I think being part of this panel is like, what can we do on the international scale to further digital inclusion? I think it's a key. Like, I'm just still thinking about it, right? Because, you know, I mentioned that, like, sometimes the federal government, because, you know, the US has a decentralized government system. So some branches of the government are really starting to engage with that. So I know Lauren put up a link from the Federal Reserve Bank, talk about how digital inclusion now can be qualified to get funding under the Community Investment Act. So banks can now invest in digital inclusion. But as an international level, like, how far and where exactly can we raise the issue and share best practices for just helping the work in digital inclusion? So, you know, is it something that is the United Nations is as part of their areas that they're focused on? You know, they work on maintaining international peace and deliver humanitarian work, but also promoting sustainable development. So, is it something that collectively, as an international digital inclusion coalition, if you will, like, is that our goal? Like, I think you help us, figure out what's the playing field when we talk about digital inclusion and collaborating in an international field, having this clear organization, I don't know, or effort that we can push forward. So I would argue right now that, the United Nations now looking at access to technology as part of their sustainable development or to bring peace, that's an area that, we can, collectively start saying like, hey, you should look at that. What's the role that digital inclusion can play in those areas? So.
All right, we've only got a couple of minutes left. So just to the other panelists, any other thoughts then on what can be done through international collaboration that could make a difference to digital inclusion?
Yeah, I would like to see government internationally encourage all these other businesses who benefit from our communities being online to step up a little bit more and support more. So, for example, I have the ability to order something through Amazon now and it turns up in an hour at my front door. Okay, fair enough, that's geography restricted and that doesn't happen 20 miles down the road, but it also doesn't happen to my next door neighbour who isn't online. So all these organisations that saturate our communities and we are their consumers, I would like government to push forward on encouraging them to support this far more than they already do.
Great. Kathleen, do you have a thought you'd like to share there?
Sorry, just echoing what the other panelists have said, that I think this is an area that would be good to do some more work in.
Great, okay. Achilles, then, maybe I'll give you the last word. Anything further that you think can be done through international collaboration that could make a difference to digital inclusion?
I think many things can be done through international collaboration. It's my personal belief that we can achieve more if we collaborate more. As coming from Europe that is a multicultural society, I know that cultural differences, if treated properly, if treated in the right way, they can lead to big advances. So I would expect at international level to support exchange of good practices, to support of exchange of training curricula and content, and also exchange of people, expert trainers and so on. And then I would also like to see the frameworks that have been developed in Europe. Also, there are similar frameworks in other parts of the world. We might talk and see if we can align them so that digital skills and competencies are treated in more or less similar ways and recognized around the world.
Right. Well,
can I just add one thing? Like, I love what Achilles was saying on digital inclusion, and working within and strengthening our conversation within our countries, and then, having this conversation at international level. So with that said, I know NDIAs have net inclusion. It's on April 1st and 3rd here and I think it's in North Carolina. So I think that's another way we can continue this conversation, especially here in the US, but and then expanding this conversation internationally. This is a great place to go and start, working on that.
Great. Look, I'm sure there's a lot more to be said, which will hopefully be said at future engagements in a future point in time. So I do hope that this is only a very small part of the beginning of something much larger. So what I'd like to do now is firstly thank our panellists for giving up their time at various points in the day. So to Achilles, Nicola, Kathleen, and Munirih, thank you very much for giving up your time and contributing your thoughts to this discussion. To our online moderator, Shauna Edson, thank you very much for performing that role and for going through the chat to pull out the gems that needed to be put forward to our panellists. Dr. Kate Davis, thank you for being our technical behind-the-scenes superstar and making this run as smoothly as it has. Thank you also to the University of Southern Queensland for providing the online platform that we have been using today. I'd also like to thank John Hugan and Angela Seifer for coming together and inspiring this in the first place. Without their efforts here, we wouldn't have been talking right now. So thank you all thank you for being involved. And thank you to everyone who has been listening and viewing online. Thank you for participating. Hopefully you've been able to pull out some inspiring thoughts, some ideas. Certainly there's been a lot of very good chat going on in the chat line with regard to links to other activities and so forth. So thank you all for being involved, and we hopefully will be seeing and hearing from you again in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.